Kip, Happy New Year, brother. Great to see you. This is a great way to start out the year. It's January 2nd, so let's get after it.
Dude, I love it. I love it. And might as well bring it up really quick. Enrollment is open in the Iron Council. To join us, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. It's going to be open this week, and then we're closing the doors until next quarter.
Yeah, it closes on the 7th, so that's Sunday. We'll close it up. Also, if you've been on the fence about our Brotherhood, the Iron Council, then on January 4th, so that's Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're doing a preview. So, Kip, you're going to talk about culture. We've got Alan Placer. He's going to talk about mindset and some other calls that he does in the Iron Council. We've got Wayne McPherson, who's going to talk about battle teams, what specifically a team looks like. And then Lex, a lot of guys know and love Lex. He's been around for a long time. He's going to be talking about systems and structures. So it's going to be a really good overview of what the Iron Council is. And whether you decide to join or not, I think it's going to give you some insight into what a man needs to thrive as he rolls into 2024. So that's January 4th, this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And the link is theironcouncil.com/preview. So theironcouncil.com/preview, 8 p.m. Eastern, Thursday, the 4th.
Perfect. That'll be fun. It'll be a great call.
I'm looking forward to it. It's always good.
All right, man. So we got questions today from the Iron Council. And so we'll just go ahead and jump right into those. So John McDermott, he says, how about dealing with critics and people that aren't supportive of your goals and dreams, even if they are family members? How do we deal with these critics?
So whenever I hear, and we've been doing this quite a bit now, we're going at it for a while, almost 9 years.
We got some reps in. Yeah.
Yeah. And whenever I hear, how do I deal with fill in the blank? The answer is usually it's best not to. It's really best not to. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anybody any sort of loyalty. They don't frankly owe you really anything. Now, that said, I know there's a caveat. You might have your wife, for example, who, it's probably a good idea to explain what you're doing to her so you guys are on the same page. That's a team member. But there's no reason for you to have to over-explain yourself or convince somebody or try to get them onto your side. If you have critics, just let your work do the speaking. When I started Order of Man, look, I'm not gonna pretend I was a victim and people hated what I was doing and they didn't get it and didn't understand. I had a few people, but the overwhelming response was one of indifference. It was like, oh, that sounds cool, whatever. It wasn't negative, it wasn't positive, it was just indifference. People were doing their own thing and they weren't excited about what I was, and of course that makes sense. But over the years, they see the growth, they see the progress, they see the success that we've enjoyed and experienced and frankly created. And now they're allies. Now they're advocates. Now they're champions of the cause. They believe in what we're doing because we proved that what we were doing was a worthwhile endeavor. And if you look around in podcasting, on social media, how many men's movements do you see? I'm not going to take all the credit for that, but what we've created here there's some credit deserved because of what we've created. And that's great. I love that. I've been talking about the importance of having other men's spaces for years and years. But it only took place because people saw that we blazed a trail that wasn't there before. And so it opened up avenues and veins and resources and opportunities that didn't exist before we got into the game 9 years ago. So again, the bottom line, you don't have to convince anybody. You don't have to sell anybody. Just let your work do the speaking. And if people don't get it, so what? That's fine. If they're family members, in the spirit of the way the question was asked, if they're family members, and I'm not even talking about your folks or your siblings or aunts or uncles, I'm talking about your wife and kids, then I would lead with asking questions because maybe they have some valid concerns that you can address and you can help alleviate those concerns through healthy dialogue. But outside of that, you don't owe anything to anybody.
Yeah. How do those questions look in that example, Ryan? So, I mean, if you're getting on the path, you have some aspirations, some goals that you want to get after, and your wife is pushing back and is not very supportive, what does that specifically look like, perhaps?
I think the best thing you can do is tackle it by saying, hey, hon, I know you have some concerns or skepticism about what I'm doing. can we sit down and talk about a few things tonight? And let her prepare for what you want to talk about. Don't just say, hey, can we talk tonight? That could be scary. Usually that's a scary conversation. That's bad news. But if you say, hey, I know you have some reservations, some apprehension about this new project or this new thing that I'm working on. Do you think you and I could carve out some time, maybe for half hour after the kids go to bed, and talk specifically about that? So what you're doing there is you're honoring her feelings. You're giving her a little bit of a heads up as to what you want to talk about. So you're not leaving her in the dark, and you're giving her plenty of time to think about what she might want to address with you. So I think that's a very respectful way to bring it up. And then when you have that conversation, I just head on. Hey, hon, I've told you about this. I'm very excited about it. I think you're excited too. And I know how supportive you are, but I also understand that maybe you have some concerns. Money is obviously a concern. My time, am I going to be giving you and the kids enough attention? How's this going to impact my current work? There's a lot of questions that you might have about that. I would love to talk about those things. Would you mind sharing with me what your fears are? Man, I think, and here's the other thing too. If you can have that question, or excuse me, that conversation in a healthier way, if all of your other conversations leading up to this one are healthy, and if they aren't, well, here's a great time to do it. Because what I've noticed about myself in the past is that my response has been volatile. So somebody might come to me and say, maybe my ex-wife or my children might come to me with something and share something with me. And it's 50-50 whether I respond positively or negatively. And if that volatility is present, they're not going to do it. They're just not going to come talk to you. Yeah. So whatever the response is, whatever her fears are, be very careful of A, being volatile, and then B, dismissing them. So if she says, I'm worried about money, say, oh, you don't need to worry about that. That's dismissive of her concern. Yeah. She does need to worry about that. So you can say, I understand. I'm actually worried about the finances too. Can I share with you some ways that I think we can hedge against that fear? Number one, we've built up a great nest egg. Number two, I have residual income coming in from work. So even if I don't bring in as many new clients because I'm focused on this other venture, we still have income coming in. Number three, you and I have done a tremendous job paying off debt. And so we don't, outside of the house payment, we don't have any other debt that we need to worry about. So I definitely feel those concerns, but here's my plan for making income to replace what we might lose. That might just be an example. So you don't ever dismiss what somebody's feeling, like, oh, don't worry about that. No, she is worried about that. So acknowledge it, and then share with her ways that you might hedge against what her fear might be.
Yeah. The only thing I can't help but realize, you're kind of alluding to it. People communicate with us based upon their experience with us, right? And so if I've run my mouth so many times, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I've constantly failed to stay in integrity and honor my word, and this is yet another shiny object for Kip to go after, don't be surprised if we're not getting the support. And so there's some value in, and I'm not saying like just give up in the world because of our past experiences, but maybe approach the conversation from a humility perspective of, hey, people interact with us for a reason, right? Maybe my kids are hesitant to tell me why, because last time they gave me advice, I shamed them for it, and I attacked them for it, and I was aggressive or whatever. So just kind of go into it realizing that, there's an element that we play in how people interact with us, and we may not be getting the support that we need because in the past we haven't honored that support, and so that's part of your strategy is like, how do I address that, and what am I going to do this time that I didn't do last time, right? Which is obviously just valuable in itself.
Well, one thing on that same note that I've thought about is that I've damaged relationships, just like we all have. Like we've all damaged relationships. We've all burned bridges. Some of them is irreparable. I can't even say that word. Irreparable damage. Is that right? That sounds weird, but you get it. Is damage beyond repair. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not very smart. I'm more of a simple guy. So damage beyond repair.
Parowan High School. So
that's right.
Give the guy
not much better than South Severe. So we'll just throw that out. Monroe, even worse. It wasn't even South Severe. It was, you guys had to go from Monroe to South Severe.
Yeah, I didn't even go to school.
But the way I look at it is, imagine that you injure your shoulder and you're out for a period of time. Well, you might have to have some surgery. And so you get surgery done on your shoulder, and then you let it heal, and then you go to physical therapy, to rehab, to do the work on it. And you're not out there like bench pressing, 3 plates like you might have been before, but you're getting some bands. Maybe you're just working on range of motion. Then you move into band work. Then you move into light dumbbells, and then gradually it increases. And over time, you're able to get back to where you were, hopefully, and maybe even better. Relationships, I think, are very much the same way. We've all done damage to relationships, and every engagement, every conversation, every time that you have an opportunity to converse with a person like that, it's an opportunity for rehab, where you're actually rehabbing the relationship. You may have showed up very poorly in the past, as all of us have. You may have said things, you may have done things, you may not have honored your word, you may have lied, you may have undermined trust. But this opportunity is an opportunity for you just to put a little deposit in the bank account, to mix analogies.
Yeah.
And you do that enough, you're rehabbing the relationship, and over time you begin to develop and build that trust. But you don't go from injured shoulder to benching 315.
Yeah.
You go from injured shoulder to range of motion, to bands, to light weights, back up. Same thing with relationships. If you undermined trust because you're volatile, you don't go all of a sudden, why don't they trust me anymore? What the hell? Okay, that's a deposit, or that's a withdrawal. So you were mad, or you're upset that you don't have trust in a relationship. And rather than working to build it up, you got pissed off and you undermined even more of that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. You went to go bench 350 with the broken shoulder and destroyed it even more. Yeah.
Or hurt your other one now, right? So
totally.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, Brian Grogan, how do you deal or navigate with a family member who needs to move out of your house, but is scared, worried, deeply about the future? So scared that they resist, sometimes violently aggressive.
If it's violent and aggressive, 2 things come to mind. Number one, maybe this is mental illness. I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's violent and aggressive because of it, there's some mental issues going on. Yeah. That might be an issue. And also, now you're in a dangerous situation and it needs to happen even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't want that around either.
Right. Because it's dangerous for you and whoever else you might have in the house, including that person.
Yeah.
So this needs to happen sooner rather than later. The problem with, I think, and I'm making some assumptions, I'm filling in the gaps here.
I'm like, is this a kid? Is this an in-law? Is this another adult?
If it's a child, I think that's a little bit more sensitive than it might be, a brother or your parents or something, right? Even parents would be hard. But the assumption that I was making is that there's a pattern of behavior for an extended period of time that you've enabled this individual. Oh. And what happens, it's a lot like, let's say I go outside and I see a bald eagle injured. Its wing is broken. It's injured. It's laying in the field. And I pick up that bald eagle and I bring it in and I nurse it and I feed it and I coddle it and I bandage its wing and I do everything that I can to, get this bald eagle back to 100% health. Over time, I go and release that thing into the wild. It's going to die. It's not going to look for food. It's going to get attacked by other predators. Like, it's just going to die because I hamstringed it. Yeah. And you see that a lot of animals that are rescued never are released back into the wild because they're incapable of dealing with it. So we might be having this situation here where it's all of a sudden, what are you going to do? You're going to kick that person out. They don't have a job. They don't have any skills. They don't have any money and they have no resources. That seems a little harsh. In certain circumstances, maybe that is what needs to take place. But what I might suggest, again, a lot of assumptions here. What I might suggest is stop enabling them in small, manageable ways and work up to the place where it's now I'm going to kick you out of the nest. So that might mean, hey, you're going to start paying me $200 a month for rent. Or, hey, you're going to start, if you're going to live here, here's some rules that are in place, and you're going to abide by these rules, including help straighten the house, clean the house, contribute to food and cooking. You're going to contribute. You're also, over the next 3 months, going to find yourself gainful employment. You can stay here, but you are in the next month or two going to find gainful employment. And if you're doing that and I see that progress, then good. You can stay here for a little bit longer until you're able to get on your own. But what I'm saying is you introduce opportunities for them to gain some sovereignty and independence in manageable ways without just completely kicking this person to the curb, which it's a family member. You don't want to do that. And frankly, it probably is not even healthy or productive for that individual who you've coddled for however many years you have.
Yeah. Love it, man.
Would you add anything to that?
No, not really. I mean, I think address the scared and worried, right? And you address that by giving them reps, right? It's like, hey, dude, you're paying rent. You're pulling your weight a little bit. Now it's cheaper rent than normal. Now that's the next step. But certainly don't delay it, right? Like, and I think there's a lot of opportunity that we could create those opportunities for them to own their situation and empower them, but tackle them. Like, we have a tendency sometimes, like, especially with like college age kids, I think it's like, oh, well, once they get college, then all of a sudden like some switch happens and they become responsible. And it's like, no, start that now, right? Like, start whatever that is now. They don't need to graduate to be able to figure some of this stuff out, and they need the reps. Like, there's just life. You don't learn from life until you let life start happening. So
yeah, I mean, don't delay it. And like, I mean, I think we're beating a dead horse now, so I won't really get into much more detail, but yeah, well, there's only one other thing I would say is you just have to have some sort of boundaries in place. So Kip, if you're with me and you're staying at my place, just as a little role play here, and I tell you, hey Kip, rent is $300 a month. You're gonna have to start paying that. And if you don't pay that, you have a 30-day window to pay that. And if you don't pay it, then you're going to have to find your own place within the next 30 days.
Yeah. Really clear on the expectations and the results of those not being met. Yeah. Good point.
I would also say to you, if this was the scenario, I'd say, hey, Kip, you need to start paying rent. I want you to contribute here. There's costs associated with having you here, utilities and food bill and everything. So I need you to start paying rent. It's also in your best interest to learn how to manage all of this stuff so you can go out and do this on your own. But let's talk about some of the ramifications if you don't. What do you think should be the ramification if you fail to pay me rent in a timely manner?
Yeah, totally. And then that way I'm bought into it. I'm the one that suggested it. Yeah. It's great. Yep.
Cool.
All right. Rob Thompson, give the IC as a whole an after action review. Over the last 8 years, or 9, he says, has the Iron Council fulfilled the vision you set out with? Where is it crushing it? What would you like to see it do better? And what does 2024 look like for the Iron Council coming down the pipeline?
Yeah. So, and I'll start at the beginning. I won't drone on and on about it. I'll do the quick, 30,000 foot view AAR. But when we started the Iron Council, it was almost 9 years ago, actually probably about 8, because we started a little bit after the Order of Man movement. And we originally had 12 members, and we still have one of our very first member, Mark Gablowski, is still in the Iron Council. So he's been with us for almost a decade now, which is so wild to think about. Because I remember the email I sent him. In fact, I still have a screenshot of the email I sent him. And so that was 12 guys. And then we got about 10 weeks into a 12-week course, and the guys were asking for more. So we opened it up after that first round, and we grew to about 100 fairly quickly. And now we're over 1,000 guys in the Iron Council. And, men come and go. We've introduced a lot of systems and structure based on growing pains. For example, we lost a lot of the intimacy with the Iron Council. And this is the problem with a lot of men's movements. They're built around a central figurehead, and that person becomes the idol, the god, right? We all worship this individual. We've never done that.
We all want the call with that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one thing, if I'm tooting my own horn here a little bit, that I did very well is realize this wasn't about me. And so I created systems that allowed the connections and the accountability to take place without me having to be the central figurehead. That's helpful for me because I have other things like family and personal goals and relationships that I'm working on, so I can do those things. And it's also helpful for the guys because I'm not the bottleneck. I don't want to be the
Yeah.
bottleneck to their growth. So there's men like you, and there's men like Lex and Alan and Jay and Chris and Drew and Reese. I could go on with the men who help us, but we've enabled them to, I shouldn't say enabled, we've empowered them to step into their own talents and skill sets and then contribute, which allows there to be less of a bottleneck. So there's a lot of growth. This is why battle teams, for example, started. This last year, 2023, I'm going to have to wrap my head around that one. We started releasing a couple of courses. We got a lot more strategic on not only battle team leaders, but having battle team leader mentors. These are guys who have proven themselves capable of managing, building, inspiring teams, are now helping 3 to 5 teams each do the same. And then as far as moving into the new year, you're going to see a lot more courses come online. You personally wrote a leadership development program that we're going to continue to flesh out and grow and make more robust through videos, through Q&As, through other plans that we have that we don't necessarily need to get into details with right now. And then we're going to continue that structured environment that isn't, again, built around a central figurehead that all the members are supposed to worship. If anything, it's not honor that individual. In this case, me, it's honor the process, honor the system, honor the mission. And if we as leadership do that, look, I've had to ask team leaders to step down because the mission comes first. It's not the individual. If it was the individual, I could probably baby or coddle that person who's not doing a good job, but that would be a disservice to all the other people who I've promised and made a commitment to. So the mission comes first, and then the people support the mission. And we give them the resources to do that. But you're going to see a lot more structure and resources around the system, the process of personal development.
Yeah, dude, it's been awesome. It's been such a fun journey. You know, one thing that you mentioned a couple of times, and I know this isn't necessarily where I'm going off a tangent off Rob's question, but I want to ask you about this because this has been a breakthrough, and I wanted to get your feedback on this breakthrough that I've had. But so often I've looked at decentralized command as it's a scaling, right? And I just stopped there. I'm like, oh, well, this is how you scale, right? And you break things out. So then that way, as we get larger, Ryan's not managing, you know, the accountability of, you know, 1,500 guys, right? Like that's just not feasible.
No.
The thing that has been really present to me of late is it's also not how we influence people, right? Like part of the decentralized command is that we have team leads running a team of, you know, roughly 15 guys. Why 15? Because at that level, that battle team leader and his XO can positively influence those individuals because they're in a position of influence. There's a big difference between a figurehead preaching at the pulpit, right, and giving ideas versus someone that has an established relationship with the individuals that they're leading. And thus, they're the person that is in the best position to influence and hold them accountable. So it's not just scale, but it's effectiveness and quality. And it's somewhat naive, I think, for organizations to assume that Ryan is in a position of influence necessarily. A guy on a battle team somewhere, I need to know what's going on in his life. I establish relationship. I understand what's going on. Like I'm now the person of influence for him. Ryan may not know the backstory and all these other things. And so in a large scaled organization, he's not really in a position to provide as much quality services to the individual team member as the battle team leader would be.
Yeah. I mean, spot on. I think if you want to look at the efficacy of not just a movement or an organization, but an individual, don't look at how many followers they have. That to me isn't, they might have a good message. They might have something that resonates.
Yeah.
Sure. And it could even be positive, but I don't think that's necessarily effective. What I'd rather know about an individual is how many more leaders they're producing. So if a guy needs me, for example, to operate and function correctly in his life, that's a failure on my part as a leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels good, strokes my ego. And that's what a lot of these guys will do. You'll see them. They'll just run their mouths, flap their gums, talk about great, they're wonderful, follow me, do what I do. That's not what I'm interested in. I want a man who listens to what we're doing, whether it's something you say or I say or any number of podcast guests that we have on, and they take it, they internalize it, it becomes infused into their DNA, and now they're leading their families. Now they're leading in their communities. Now they're stepping up in their businesses. Now they're serving their clients, and they're leading effectively, not just following me around helplessly or blindly. I don't want that. And you'll see a lot of people do that. And it's unfortunate because it doesn't serve people in the long run. And the other thing I wrote down here is this isn't like the Despicable Me movement where I have a bunch of minions who just cling on to every word I say. That would be pathetic.
Yeah.
Because it serves me, but it doesn't serve anybody else. And we're here to serve other men so they can go out and do the same thing on their own outside of our help and influence.
In a self-directed manner, not a, oh, I got to run this by Ryan for me to be able to make decisions.
Right.
Yeah, good call. Jason Clark, we all have certain level of capacity to accomplish tasks. How do you evaluate, strategize your goals and tasks in relation or in consideration of your capacity? Secondly, how do you know when to push to increase your capacity and when to say no?
Interesting. I tend to be more of an, it is. It's a hard one for me to answer because I tend to be more of an intuitive planner where I could look at, for example, I've got my, my battle plan here and I can write down everything that needs to get done for the day. And intuitively I can say that needs to get done. Like that's the priority. And I don't actually spend a lot of time strategizing like, oh, should I do this or should I do that? I'm like, nope, that's pressing. That needs to get done. Or maybe it's not even pressing, but it's going to move the needle the most. Well, is it Stephen Covey who talks about
4 quadrants?
Yeah, important and urgent, right? So let's think if we can get this right. So it's important and urgent. It's important and not urgent. It's not important, but urgent, and not important, not urgent.
Yep.
I get that right?
Yep, totally.
And if I remember correctly, he says to focus on the important, but not urgent first. Is that accurate?
Well, no, I mean, if I remember, if it's important and urgent, those are fires that actually do need to be addressed.
Right.
What the things you want to stay away from is urgent and not important, and not urgent and not important, right? Like, just get those off the table immediately, but try to scale and move into fire prevention, right? Which is not urgent, but important.
Yeah. So a practical application of that would be my task for this week. So one that is important and urgent is that we have our Iron Council preview on Thursday. I need to find the correct way, the technology to ensure that it will also broadcast in our Facebook group and on YouTube. That's important and it's urgent because it's Thursday.
Get out that black magic, man.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got it right here. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Now, something in my business that would be important but not urgent is that I'm going to be releasing dates for 2 events that we have this year. That's very important. It's not super urgent because we've got a little bit of time. But it's important that the funnels are set up correctly, that the wording, that the dates, that everything is where it needs to be. And then that way, when I release it later this week, or maybe beginning of next week, it's fine. Like I've already addressed it and it's no longer a fire because it's already done. So that would be a practical application of Stephen Covey's 4 quadrant principles.
Yeah.
As far as capacity, just ask yourself, did I accomplish the task?
Yeah.
Did I get it done? And if you got it done, then you were capable of doing it. And then ask yourself, could I have done it better? Which the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
And in order to do it better, what new skills do you need to do? So if you're going to do it again, and a lot of the times the tasks that we do require us to improve and to continually do them, then ask yourself, what can I do to improve? And what resources do I need? And what skill set do I need to develop? And that might be marketing, for example, in a business. That would be an important, but not urgent. So what you could do is you could realize, hey, I see that marketing is important. I see that if I do this, I could be better. And so I'm going to purchase a course on internet marketing, email marketing, social media marketing. And I'm going to take that over the next 30 days so that when I do this next month, I'm more prepared to do it moving forward. Not the only other way, another way that you can evaluate your performance is to ask a third party how they perceive your performance, because they're not as biased about your performance as you are. And if you have somebody who's trusted and somebody who's honest, then they're going to give you crucial feedback that would be impossible for you to see in any other way. So ask for that feedback from qualified sources who are willing to be honest with you. And to our first question about how to deal with critics or family members who might, or, don't respond negatively. If Kip, I say, hey, Kip, can you give me some feedback on the way that I communicate a point on our Ask Me Anythings? And you say, Ryan, you do a great job at this, but here's one thing is you stumble over your words, or you use this filler phrase quite a bit. And if I get all pissed off and butthurt about you saying that, not only did I undermine the actual advice that could have helped me, I just cut you off at the knees, and you're never going to offer advice to me again.
Yeah.
So just say, even if you don't agree with it, I don't even have to agree with it. Is say, Kip, I appreciate the feedback. I will take that into consideration. I'm going to go back and listen and see what I actually do, because that is valuable feedback. I don't have to agree to say that. So it's thank you. I appreciate you giving me that feedback. And I'm going to take that into consideration as I try to improve.
Yeah. And if you explain it, by the way, that feels the same. So if I say you have this filler when you're like, oh, well, I do that because of blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you're not listening.
It's an excuse.
So just sit with it.
Yep.
Yeah. Sit with it.
No defense. Don't be defensive.
Yeah.
Just say thank you.
Jason, one thing that has been very present for me, probably over the last 6 months mostly, is energy management. That's my problem. It's not capacity. It's not schedule. It's not how many hours. If anything, I almost feel like, man, I could do more. I could do more. I have these little spots of time or whatever. So there's two things that I have to keep in mind: the energy towards it, and mostly the leftover energy for my family, because I can have capacity to be with my kids. But if I'm doing it from the perspective of angry and frustrated and I'm tired and all these other things, then I'm not going to do it well. So just be mindful of energy management, if you want to use that term. And then the second part is the price. What's the price that you're willing to pay? And I've said that probably one too many times, but far too often we'll take on new things, right? Well, I'm going to do all these things. What's the price? And who's paying the price? And is it worth it? And just make sure that you're clear on the price that needs to be paid.
I love it. So I wrote down a quick little 3 questions that you can ask yourself on energy management.
Ooh, Friday field notes coming right at you here at the AMA.
Get your notepads
I know
out,
your
fellas.
ways. I know your ways.
I work good in frameworks, so this is why I do this. So hopefully it serves other guys. All right. So energy management. So when you're presented with something new, like a new task, a new assignment, a new project, whatever, the first question is, does this have to be done? That's the very first question. And there's two litmus tests that you can measure that against. Number one, it's a priority or it's a preference. So for example, we're into the new year. Tax season is knocking on our doors. That does it have to get done? Yes. That's not a preference. That's a priority. It has to be done. A preference might be our Thursday call, right? Our Thursday Iron Council call. Does it have to be done? No. But it's a preference. It's something that we think will benefit the men who join the call and end up banding with us in the Iron Council. It's a preference. So the answer to that question, does it have to get done? Both of those, yes. If it's no, then just clear it off your table. If it's not a priority or preference, you're not obligated to do it. So if somebody calls me up and says, hey, Ryan, man, I need help moving this weekend. Can you help me? And it's not a priority or a preference for me, the answer is no. and then I can just forget about it. If you called me and said, would you help me move? That would be a preference for me because I care about you and our relationship. Then I would say yes, and I would work it into the schedule. Okay. The next question is, if it's a yes, it's a preference or priority and it has to be done. The next question is, should I be the one to do it? So with the technology for our Thursday call, I'm not super proficient in that, but Drew Kachurik is. So I called Drew this morning. I left him a message. He called me back. Actually, I just saw my phone ring. He called me back. I'll get back with him. And hopefully he'll be able to help me with some answers and get that set up. So should I be the one to do it? And if the answer is no, it needs to get done. I don't need to be the one to do it, and I shouldn't be the one to do it. Then the third question is, who should? And then you delegate that to the right person who has the capacity, like Jason's talking about, and the skill set, and is capable of fulfilling or meeting that responsibility.
There you go. Framework. Future Friday field notes. All right.
I don't know. I think we said it all right there. What else is there to talk about?
All right. Trevor Cap, new to the Iron Council, and I've asked this question in a couple channels already, but I want to know what y'all think. I'm trying to prep mentally for a court hearing that's holding my mother's daughter in contempt of court for not following the court-ordered parenting plan. How would you mentally prepare for that? I'm not wanting to talk badly about her as a mother, but I know they are going to come after me in full force and paint me as a bad father. Side note, there are no assault, abuse, or neglect allegations. I left for a year to attend trade school to further my career.
You said his mother's daughter, but I'm wondering if he meant his daughter's mother.
Holding my mother's daughter.
Because his mother's daughter would be his sister.
Yeah. So
maybe
his daughter's
mother. Okay. I just want to be clear. Like I'm just wrapping my head around
I bet you're right. I bet you're right.
Okay. So we'll just assume it's daughter's mother. So maybe your ex is what it sounds like to me.
And he doesn't want to throw her under the bus, but they're coming for him.
Yeah. I don't think just because they're going to be coming for you that you need to throw her under the bus. I think you can be honest about the circumstances, and that might not paint her necessarily in a favorable light. But if you're honest, you're not throwing her under the bus.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney. So my first advice would be ask your attorney that question.
Yeah.
Because they're going to tell you from a legal standpoint, from a mental standpoint, they've done this, they do this. They're going to tell you, and then listen to them. Please, if they tell you to do something or not do something, I don't really care about your feelings. I don't care about how you feel about her or what you're experiencing. Just do what they tell you to do because they're experts. You hired that person for a reason. Let their advice work for you by doing it. The only thing I would add that I think an attorney would probably corroborate on this is just make sure you document everything. When I was going through my divorce, I went to AA meetings and I started going to a therapist. I wrote down every meeting I attended, every therapy session that I had. I took notes about what I did. Everything was well documented. If I went to trade, I didn't, but like you, if you went to trade school, why did you go to trade school? It's so you can put yourself in a better financial situation so that you can get a home for your children where they're going to feel good and comfortable and happy and fulfilled. So everything that she might throw at you or the attorneys might throw at you, you need to anticipate what that might be and then have documented evidence that proves the contrary.
Yeah.
If they say you're an alcoholic, and I don't think you are, I don't know the situation, but I'm just using this as an example. If they say, well, he's a raging alcoholic, but then you have 7 months history of AA meetings, including detailed notes, no arrests, no DUIs, that doesn't really hold any weight. So make sure everything is documented that will prove the opposite of what they're going to try to smear you with. That's my 2 cents.
And make it stay connected to the intent, right? And the intent is what? Your kids. So if you're holding her contempt for messing up the parenting plan, instead of attacking her, make it about you having appropriate time with your kids and you ensuring they have appropriate time with their mother and what's best for their children. constantly bring it back to what is best for your kids and making sure that they're being supported and they have a structured system in place so it helps them and will be beneficial to their mother and you throughout the process because you know how you're dealing with things. Like the minute you start, I mean, maybe this is just debate 101, right? Stay away from attacking her and focus on the issue and how you can best serve your kids. And that's going to come, that intent will be smelled. So if the intent is wrong and you make it about attacking her, then you're just some bitter ex that's trying to smear her. Don't. Just focus on making sure that your kids are getting the best situation possible. Or kid. We're assuming a bunch here.
Yeah. I tend to, as you're saying this, think about, going into battle or even playing a competitive game, pro football game. Like, think about all the preparation that goes into being a soldier or being an athlete. And I'm not comparing the two. I'm just using those two as examples. They're well trained. They have a team of advisors and coaches and trainers and support. They always look great. Like, why do we wear uniforms? Well, we have to look the part, right? So what I would suggest to you, and again, talk with your attorney on this, but I would really pour over my social media accounts and ask myself, do I look like a douchebag or do I look like a good father?
Yeah.
Because trust me, if you look like a tool, that's ammo against you.
Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to texting your ex, look, you got to exchange texts or phone calls because you've got the kids. Just assume that's all being documented. Assume maybe even it's being recorded, whether it's legal or not. Assume she's taking screenshots of texts that you're sending. I promise you that's happening.
Yeah. Guaranteed.
So don't tee yourself up for failure. Don't do dumb things. Don't say inappropriate things. Don't make yourself look like a piece of garbage. If you're 50 pounds overweight, maybe you ought to get yourself in shape. Like this week, lose a few pounds, go to the gym, get a haircut, clean up your beard, like take care of yourself. Because when you go to court and you look like a fat slob, I'm not trying to be rude, and I'm not saying he even is. I'm just using this as an example so everybody knows that's going to say something about you. But if you show up well-dressed, looking groomed, you're able to articulate your side, if you say anything at all, because your attorneys might deal with it, that's going to be better than you looking like a fool and not preparing for what you're about to step into.
Absolutely. Ryan, Umgat, any tips for proposing to my girlfriend and steps to take following the engagement and the proposal? I have a ring, save some money, and the idea, what I have planned to do is rooftop surprise with close friends and family with music and food.
Awesome. Sounds like you're ready to go.
Yeah.
No, I think, execute. I mean, you're obviously to the point now. The only thing that comes to mind is like, have you had conversations about your future? Not like, hey, I love you. Like, finances, that's important.
And everything
but
else.
Finances, religion, children, where you want to live. Do you want her to stay home? Does she want to stay home? Does she want to work? Like all these important things. I hope you've already addressed those things. I'm excited for you. I mean, I think that's awesome. I think that's great. And it sounds like you have a good plan. As far as afterwards, I think just communication, maybe this is I think this tends to be more of a thing for women. Like they're really excited about their wedding. And so they might have a tendency of going overboard financially, but maybe that's not something that you guys want to do. So you're going to need to have a healthy conversation about what is our budget? What does this look like? How many people do we invite? How much are we going to spend? How much are we not going to spend? When is it going to be? Just open dialogue and communication. Continue even in your engagement to have the kind of conversations that we talked about. And I'm not advocating that you break it off by any means, but I would still be looking for red flags and things to be aware of before you make the complete plunge into this commitment. And again, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying you're not there yet. So just keep having those conversations.
Yeah. And it's for both of you. right? You're
Of
managing
course, right.
expectations and provide clarity. And so it needs to be addressed if you haven't. Yeah.
But
Good
I think
call.
as far as like you planning it, and sounds like you've done a good job thinking about it, and I'm excited for you, and I'd love to hear how it goes. So let me
Yeah.
know.
Congrats. Brent Wardell, I know many of us struggle with this, but would really like to cut out booze from my life, as I know it's one of the things that truly holds me back from accomplishing many of my goals in fitness, work, relationships, and being present for my kids. Good call on the presence, by the way.
Yeah.
What are some ways to get beyond this short-term progress, and to make a long-term habit where I don't even think about it anymore or even desire it?
Yeah. I was pulling up a podcast that I did. This was last year, January of 2023. So, and it's titled "What 5 Months of Sobriety Has Taught Me." So I think if you go back and you listen to that, that might help. I'll just go through these real quick. So number one, you reach rock bottom when you stop digging. Like, these aren't tactics; they're just mindsets to consider. But you reach rock bottom when you stop digging. Number two, there's a lot of emotions inside of me that I wasn't aware of. This is actually good for me to go.
Like you're using alcohol to
To cope.
address those. Yeah, to
Yeah,
cope.
not address them, to cope, or to hide
Yeah.
them, to subdue them.
Yeah.
Number three, I was really good at hiding it. So what does that tell me? Like,
You're ashamed of
bring
it or
bring your
hiding
sins
out of
into light,
integrity.
right? They can't exist in the light. Number four, I also realized I'm pretty incredible. And what I wrote here is specifically what I could do with an extra 3 to 4 hours per day that I recoup, not being drunk, passed out, or hungover. Um, Number five, alcohol does not make me a better person or a better anything. I used to think that it did. I actually convinced myself that I was a better podcaster if I was drunk, because I was more loose and able to have a different kind of conversation. That's not true.
Got it.
Number six, people appreciate transparent leadership, as I was open and honest about what I was dealing with. Number seven, trust is easy to destroy and much harder to rebuild. Number eight, your course of action will change. This one's important. Your course of action will change when the pain of the current reality that you put yourself in is greater than the struggle of change. Let me say that one
Read
again.
it again. Yeah.
Your course of action will change when the pain of the current reality that you put yourself in is greater. The pain is greater than the struggle of change, because change is hard.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I put here is that I've allowed the Spirit of God back into my life.
Can I call out something? The
Yeah, for sure.
pain of the current reality. I love that, because I think often we don't get present to the pain of the current reality, right? Like, we downplay the impact of our actions when reality, it's there. The pain and the suffering and the hardship, it's all there. We just choose not to look at it. So, because some people might say, well, Ryan, it's not destroying my life, right? So the pain isn't there. No. And Brent kind of alludes to it here, right? The pain's there. Goal in his fitness, effect in his work, his relationships, and present to his kids. Just grab the last one. That might be enough to get present to and go, whoa, right? And us really like feeling the impact of that. Then your seventh bullet, I think, becomes really powerful. And I would suggest the pain's there. We're just choosing not to look at it.
I agree. And it is destroying your life. You just haven't realized the result yet, because your wife hasn't left you, or you haven't abused her or one of your children, or you haven't got arrested
Lost
for
a
a
job
DUI or hit
yeah.
somebody. You haven't lost a job, got yourself into financial hardship. You haven't done irreparable damage to your body, like, and have a medical diagnosis. Like, that's coming. All of that's coming if you stay on the current path.
Yeah.
So to your point, get present to the reality of the situation you're in. You just haven't you just haven't realized the result yet, but you're on that path. It's like you're driving towards the cliff. You haven't fallen off the cliff yet, but you're on the road to the end of the cliff.
Yeah.
And you can let yourself fall off. And in some ways I did. And that was horrible because it impacted people negatively, my own doing. Or you could take a little bit of advice here and say, oh shit, pump the brakes, please, and take that next turn to a healthier place, which is right now.
Yeah.
From a tactical standpoint, I would say AA is helpful, or another meeting, but AA. One thing I did is I printed out a monthly calendar, 3 months worth of calendars, and I literally checked them all. You can go back to my Instagram account from earlier in 2023 and see, like, I checked off 3 months of sobriety. Figure out why you're doing it. Maybe therapy could come into place because you're coping and trying to subdue or hide something. You're coping in an unhealthy way. Therapy might be helpful. And then maybe there's some things that you can do to replace the behavior. You can look at Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit, or James Clear, Atomic Habits, to talk about that habit process. And for me, a lot of the times, even just boredom was a reason to drink. And so don't be bored. Find something to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I find this interesting. I just thought about this, how, and it's actually a fundamental attribution error, but nonetheless, it's interesting, where whenever we have a victim mindset, we'll excuse it, right? It's the reason. And I wonder, for most people, that when they make a bad decision, maybe being drunk or under the influence of something, they attribute the bad action to the alcohol, right? It's like, well, it's not me, I was drunk and I was whatever.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that people don't see it that way, right? No little kid went, hey, dad beat me, but it was the alcohol. No,
It's also
their
just not
dad,
true.
yeah, their dad did that to them. Right? Like, and so sometimes when we make foolish decisions underneath the influence of a substance, we'll excuse it away like it's the substance. And it's like, but no one else sees it that way but you. Everyone sees it as that's you. And that's what you're doing as an individual. So I don't know, just a thought.
That's like saying in a mass shooting, well, the gun killed those people. No, the person who walked into the school with a gun, who's pulling the trigger. A gun is not sentient. Alcohol is not sent. It doesn't make decisions. It doesn't just get up and walk and do evil things. Like, it's you. It was me. Like, yes, maybe because you were drunk, you acted out of character, but you are the one who decided to drink.
Yeah.
So make a better choice, which is what I'm trying to do.
Marcus Segura, one of my focus this year specifically is ensuring I am prepared as I want to be and should be as a new husband coming this October. So he's got 10 months. You got 10 months, Marcus, to get your act together. What is one key area you found most impactful as a new husband, current or divorced, that you wish you would have had prioritized or focused on? That's a good question. I like this.
That is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's a lot for sure, but the thing that stands out the most is making sure that our relationship is a priority and that it doesn't come before other things. And then open communication about difficult situations so that things aren't left unsaid, or problems that could potentially arise aren't addressed, or things are festering under the surface that either of us aren't willing to talk about. And a lot of that,
and making sure they get addressed, or
make sure that they get addressed. But a lot of that is, for lack of a better word, conditioning. We've heard the term, you train people how to treat you. So if your significant other is not talking to you, it's probably not because they don't want to talk to you. It's probably because you've trained them not to by your response.
Yeah.
So if you want them to communicate with you, then it's on you to change the way that you handle those discussions. And this is counter to this like ridiculous men's thing of like, well, women, they don't. Yeah, I know that there's bitches out there. I know that there's evil, and I know that some women want to get men. I know that. Like, we're not being naive about it. But for the most part, especially if you're in a relationship, for the most part, there's a lot that you can do about your own behavior that will elicit a completely and entirely different response in other people if you just show up differently.
Yeah.
And I think even if it doesn't, let's say you show up differently and she doesn't respond differently, you're not any worse. In fact, you're better off, because if that relationship does expire, then you're going to be healthier to go into your next one.
Really.
So take it on you, because you can't really control her.
Yeah, totally. I think the conversation of like, getting your own stuff together as much as possible, right? Like your own demons and your own mental health is obviously important, because that's just going to show up in the marriage. So I know that's kind of a vague statement, but I think when I first got married, and I was young, but when I first got married, I think the key thing that I felt is my perception of what was a good marriage and a bad marriage. Like I remember the first time we got in an argument and it was heated. I literally honestly thought, oh my gosh, I married the wrong person. Because I thought, oh, of a good marriage, you never argue. So then I was making the relationship wrong. I had this wrong expectation on what it took. And whenever I go to a wedding and it's like a young couple getting married, usually what I write in the card is, this will be the most difficult thing you will ever do. And it's okay. And I didn't have that mindset. And I remember once heated argument, I called my brother, dude, she blah, blah, blah. I'm just ranting. And he starts laughing, just laughs. Oh my, he's just laughing on the call. And I'm like, what? And he's like, welcome to being married, dude.
Yeah.
Deal with it. This is part of your growth. This is part of you guys growing together. It's fine. But I think far too often we have this picture perfect of how it's going to be. And it's like, no, life's tough. Marriage is tough. The question is, don't give up, right? And constantly focus on improving. I'm not saying that like shitty marriages are okay. Try to make it better, but realize also that it takes time, and you're dealing with humans, and we're dealing with stories and all these things. And it's okay when it gets rough sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you're also dealing with somebody else's past, and they are probably going to treat you in a lot of the same ways as a response to past relationships, past experiences. And so they're looking at it through a filter, or through
that
a
they may not even
lens
be aware of.
Yeah, of their past, which is in some ways healthy, in some ways unhealthy.
Yeah.
And now you're included in that now. And so but I also think that represents a really cool and powerful opportunity to, this might sound strange, but to let somebody else experience a better way, like a healthy person,
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And also to let somebody else be that for you. Because you have your own baggage. You have your own things that you're looking at negatively. And sometimes you put that on her when it has nothing to do with her. But let her show you that was an isolated experience, and there's a better way to have a relationship with her who is healthy in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I have to add one more thing, one more critical thing. There's a difference of parenting between moms and dads, and they don't have to be the same. And celebrate. It
shouldn't be the same.
Yeah. Celebrate the differences. I had that wrong for so long, and we had butt heads. Oh, no, we have to do it. And it's like, no, I'm the dad. You're the mom. we approach this slightly differently, and it's perfect and it's great and we should celebrate it. So realize that as well.
I think both are a requirement for a healthy, functioning child.
Yeah.
You know, if
But I
they
think
get,
everyone gets that wrong, don't you think?
I think
I think a lot
so.
of people think they should be the same.
Yeah, I think just generally speaking, dad tends to be more of the authoritative, disciplinary structure, and mom tends to be more of the kind, empathetic, supporting nurturer, generally.
Yeah.
If that's all a child has, the nurturing and the support, like they're never going to be introduced to hardship and they're never going to have to go out and do things on their own. If, however, it's only disciplinary and it's just rigid and not flexible and not kind, not empathetic, not supportive in any way, it's just like, do this, be the best. And they're not getting
They'll
that
be
other side.
successful and lonely.
Or they'll be a train wreck because they buck authority at every opportunity they possibly can because they hate you. So both are necessary. All right. Do we have one more question or anything, Kip?
We do. One more
Let's take
question.
one more.
Trevor Burrow, what is the most valuable lesson you've learned in 2023?
Well, 2023
this is when I'm
was
like,
a hell
man, I
of a
should have
year
read these
for
questions.
me.
Yeah, I should have read these questions earlier. What did you say? I'm sorry.
I said 2023 was a hell of a year for me.
Yeah, it's a tough year.
Actually, really hard beginning of the year. Really, really productive end of the year. And what I mean productive, I'm personally productive.
Yeah.
Not like from a business standpoint, but like personally. So my greatest lesson was, and it's not like a specific scenario, but our ability as men to adapt and evolve, I think might be the single greatest skill set that we can develop. And there's 1,000 things that we talk about, but I honestly believe our ability, I'm thinking about this, like our ability to adapt and evolve is more important than anything else. And I mean that, like, if you fail in any way, your ability to recognize failure and get better is huge. If you're presented with some sort of external circumstance beyond your control, your ability to evolve and overcome it is huge. I don't know that there's a greater skill set than that. And, you know, as I say that, I know people are going to say, well, you know, it's a relationship with God.
Yeah.
I think your relationship with God will help you to
Requires
evolve and
adaptability.
overcome, you know, because you're going to have to be humble and you're going to have to follow a set of rules and moral principles. So I think that's my greatest lesson is, am I a man who can adapt and evolve as quickly to circumstances and stimulus as I possibly can? And every time I adapt and evolve, life gets better. Every time I bury my feet in the sand and get hard-headed and tell the world and everybody else it's their problem, not mine, my life gets worse.
Man, kind of want to steal yours. I mean, relationships have been more and more, I realize, especially from a leadership perspective, that leadership effectiveness is based upon relationship, period. And people that we serve need to know that it's not, you know, me propping myself up. It's actually rooted in me wanting them to win, right? And me serving them. And so that's been a critical thing for me. But man, like, as you talked about adaptability, that's been huge for me too. Cause I've reached scenarios where luckily I'm humbling myself enough to go, okay, hold on. Is this a kit plan? Am I so locked into this because I'm protecting my ego here? And if it's not, then I gotta be able to go, all right, that was a pivot. Let's adjust. Maybe there's another approach and whatever. And I think our lack of ability to adapt is really rooted in our ego, because this is the way it should be. And we're unwilling to go, maybe I'm wrong. You know, I think I mentioned this to you in another conversation, but I did like echelon fronts, like Jocko's muster earlier this year. And one of the greatest thing coming out of that was everything is just a guess. Just a guess. You can strategize all you want, but it's still just a really good guess.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to see it that way. Otherwise, we won't adapt. We won't adjust because it's like, well, it's a Mickler plan. this is the plan, right? And we tie our identity to it so much that we don't want to pivot and adjust. And I think that's been powerful for me to go, maybe to have some passion and an opinion about it, with the idea at the same time of, I think, you know, I feel really good about this, but I might be wrong, and I'm going to be willing to adjust if it's not the right approach. And that's been kind of hard to do, the balance of those two things.
Yeah. I was yesterday in Zion National Park, and I was listening to, as you take the shuttle through the canyon, I was listening to the recording, and it talked about how the canyon was formed, and it's formed through water erosion. Yeah. And it literally, water cut through thousands of feet of rock and sediment and everything else to form this canyon. And the water, the Virgin River, is still flowing through there. They said that every once in a while, a rock slide or an obstruction will change the river. It will change the path of the river. And it happened, I think, as early as I believe they said the mid-90s, or as late as the mid-90s, where there was a huge rock slide and people got stuck up at the lodge for several days because the river washed out the road, and it's an entirely new path than it was prior to that event. This is how I look at it. Yeah. Things are going to happen. That water is still going to flow. It's just going to find a new path. It's not deterred. It might be backed up for a little bit until it backs up and pours around, or it finds a new route, but it will always find a new route. There's a great Latin quote, and I won't say it in Latin, but one of my favorite quotes is, "I will either find a way or make one." I'll either find a way or make one. And that has resonated with me.
Yeah. That's a good 2023 mantra. I like that.
I like it. 2023
well, to wrap up the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
To wrap up the
year. Yeah. Or maybe we carried in at 24.
All right, Kip, bring us home, man.
Yeah. So the key thing, call to action, Iron Council closes this coming Sunday. To join us, if you've been on the fence, join us, orderofman.com/Iron Council. Our preview night, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. If you're not quite sure what this is all about, you want to get some insights, join us on that live broadcast Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll tell you all about it. I don't remember the URL though.
theironcouncil.com/preview. Remember, I'm not creative. I'm very pragmatic. So if you want something, it's pretty easy to find. theironcouncil.com/preview. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. And as always, you can connect with Mr. Mickler on Instagram and X at Ryan Mickler. And if you haven't joined us on Facebook, feel free to join us there as well. That's facebook.com/group/Order of Man.
Cool. Thanks, Kip. Great questions today from our Iron Council members. Appreciate you guys asking those questions. And I hope that Kip and I gave you some answers to consider, to ponder, and to implement. So we'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.